Hey guys, and welcome to the podcast. I'm Mitch Docker, and of course, this is Life in the Peloton presented by our partners, MAAP. Pretty exciting over at MAAP at the moment. They've got the blurred out capsule. It's returning. The idea where ride the line between their modern performance projects and the recognition of pro race teams that did it first and did it fast. Get across and check out this epic collection over at map.cc. Well, this is Talking Luft Top 6, and we are on the eve of the Vuelta España, a race that I loved myself and a race that my guest this week, Sam Bewley, loved as well. We're sitting back chatting all things Vuelta. Sam and I, we crossed over paths at Green Edge, and he was there when we raced together there, but also when we raced in different teams, we met back at the Vuelta España. Sam and I spent a lot of time together, either at Green Edge or together in Girona or up in Andorra. We had a lot of time as he raced from 2009 right through to 2022. These days, he's a director sportif over at Israel Premier Tech, and he even dipped his toe into the broadcasting when he joined the NBC to cover the Tour de France last year. He's a man of many talents. He's the voice that you hear over at the Social Distance podcast as well. If you haven't heard that, that is well worth a listen, so go across and check that out. Well, guys, we're talking about the Vuelta España, and one thing you should definitely do is have a glass of the Life in the Peloton Elderton Wines Shiraz in your hand when you're kicking back late night here in Australia or over in Europe watching the stages of the Vuelta. What a perfect combo that we've come together with Elderton to make this beautiful, full-bodied, rich, classic Shiraz. You can kick back. You can order this anywhere in Australia. You can order it overseas. If you're a member at Elderton, you will get free shipping when you spend over $175, which is about a case of Shiraz. I think wine and cycling, they go hand in hand, especially when you're kicking back, watching the Vuelta late night here in Australia. You've had some dinner. You want to have a glass of something. Why not be a Life in the Peloton Elderton Shiraz? You can get that. Head across to eldertonwines.com.au and grab yourself a case or two. Now, guys, like I said, we're talking top 6 for Vuelta España. It's all the old things like top 5, most influential, and then one curveball to put it in the mix. Sam and I have a lot of stories to tell from the Vuelta. Like I said, him and I raced together, plus we raced against each other. There's lots of stuff to unpack in this episode of the top 6. So, guys, sit back and enjoy. Here we go on the eve of the Vuelta to get you in the mood. Top 6 with Sam Bewley. Well, here we go, Bewls. This is a treat. We're talking about the Vuelta. First of all, g'day, mate. How are you?
Good. It's good to be back on Life in the Peloton. Actually, it's been a while. We've had you on our podcast a couple of times, but it's been a while since I've been here. It's good to be back.
Have you been back on since the original prologue episode?
I think I have. Yeah, I did, because I did a Talking Luft with you a couple of years ago. That was probably the last time I did it. Actually,
prologue was potentially second or third episode I ever did.
It was a shoddy production then. I never would have thought you'd make a living out of this, or you'd turn this into such a brand. When we're sitting in some shit hotel in the outskirts of Paris talking about a prologue, like I was an expert at them, and I think I ran probably about 112th that day or something.
Go back and have a listen. It's a shout out to everyone. 2016, go back. Great episode. Well, what we're going to do here, mate, I've called you up. This is the Vuelta Top 6. We're on the eve of the Vuelta. The Vuelta's about to kick off right now. And I've said it a few times before, Paris-Roubaix is my favourite race that I used to do as a pro. And randomly, the Vuelta became my second favourite. I don't know why or what, but I just sort of love the way that the race was there at the end of the year. It was just came at a great time. You were prepared. You had a nice break for me during July, and I had a great goal at the end of the year. It was always warm, a couple of wet days every so often, but rarely. And you always be able to finish on a high. How many times do you do the Vuelta, Bewls? Because we crossed over a few times, we raced together, but you also just tuned in the Vuelta a lot of times as well.
We did the Vuelta together in the same team, I think twice, and then once maybe when you were in EF. That was the last year I did the Vuelta. I did 5. I thought I'd done 6 actually, but I had a look just before we started recording. It was only 5. So 5 Vueltas, which was actually, like you, it was a Grand Tour that I did all 3 Grand Tours, but I did more Vueltas than any other. So a race that I'm pretty familiar with.
Did you like it though, like me, or did you actually hate it?
I liked it. Probably kept me motivated through the last half of the season. But no, I did like the Vuelta. It was always a cool race, and like it was a race that kind of has evolved a lot over the years. From being a Grand Tour that often you sent the younger guys to, or the first year pros or second year pros to get a Grand Tour in the legs because it was a little bit easier. But it's evolved to like, man, they're all the same now, and I think we probably saw that a little bit, like doing the Vueltas early in our careers and then doing the Vuelta late in our careers, the difference in the way they race that Grand Tour, and it's turned into just as hard as any other Grand Tour now. So it was always a fun way to finish the year, and you essentially did finish the year there. I mean, maybe you pinned a number on again once or twice, but ultimately, it was a cool way to finish the season because it was a big goal, like you say. It was a big 3-week race. You did that, and then by the time you finished, it was middle of September. Maybe you'd go off and do the Worlds a week or two later, and then you kind of park it up for the October festivities from there on.
And we also obviously experienced it through its hardest period of the Vuelta, when they really ramped it up to make it the hardest Grand Tour there was, and then they've toned it back in the last few years.
Exactly. Yeah. Now it's gone back to one of those developmental races.
Exactly. Well, in case anyone hasn't heard this, the idea is here. We're going to pick 5 most influential moments for us that makes the race of Vuelta for us. Our experiences, whatever it is, it could be a mountain, could be a rider, could be our own experience. And then we've just got one little curveball to make the top 6. I guess we'll do a quick little introduction about the race. The race first started in 1935, and it evolved over the years. Jacques Anquetil won the Vuelta in 1963, the first rider to win all 3 Grandies. It was originally in late spring, in April. Back then, they used to run the Vuelta, then the Giro, then the Tour. And actually, for a period, they snuck the Vuelta after the Giro. Just for a few years, they had the Giro, then the Vuelta, then the Tour. Then later on, in 1995, much, much later on, they moved it to September, where it's actually found its home now. And in 2014, ASO acquired the race, which is sort of the period that we're talking about. It really sort of has changed, hasn't it?
Well, now the ASO, I mean, they've got the ability to bring in draw cards as well. You've seen it in the past, like in other races that they do. For example, I just did the Arctic race of Norway, which is another race it's a small race, obviously, but it's owned by the ASO. They bring Chris Froome in, so that once the ASO took over, there was this new attraction to it. They sort of upped the ante of the event, and it became more attractive to the best riders in the world to go there. And now we're looking at an era of who's going to be the first guy to win all 3 Grand Tours in 1 year. And Pogacar's just done the Giro and the Tour. All this talk about was he going to go to the Vuelta this year? He's not, but he's going to at some point. And so then all these guys, they want to, guys like Pogacar and Vingegaard and those sorts of guys, they want to win everything, all Grand Tours at some point in their career. So you get the best of the best there now.
Well, I don't know if he could come back and do all 3 though.
He could, yeah. this year he could have, I reckon.
It
might have been
to do it all again.
Might have been,
you know what I mean? To do the whole campaign. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, let's kick it off because we've got heaps to get through. Should I kick things off?
Sure.
I'm going to go to a mountain straight up, and there's a reason why I'm going to go to it. It's the Bola del Mondo. It's just outside of Madrid. It was only used in the first time in the 2010 Vuelta, and in the history of the race, specifically on stage 20, which took place as well for me in my first Vuelta in 2012. It was stage 20. And look, just to give you a little bit about the climb, it's absolute brute of a climb. I've seen 2 things here, because in the actual manual, they have it actually only as 13K at 8%. But when you look into it, it's actually 22K at 6%. But what makes this climb so brutal is the last 3K. It averages 15%. The last 500 meters is 23%. And this climb for me, it's a typical Vuelta climb where they go, you know what, there's actually a little bit of mountain left over there. Should we just get a truck and just open up, and let the concrete roll down the mountain? And that's going to be the last K of the race. That is a common occurrence in the Vuelta, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's like, and that's one of my things, one of my 5 things I thought about when I thought about the Vuelta was just the introduction of the climbs over the last 10 years, maybe less, over the last 5 or 6 years, where the Vuelta's gone heavily away from sprinters. You don't see any sprinters there anymore, really. You might get 1 or 2 sprints. You might get 1 or 2 really heavily reduced groups. But ultimately, the Vuelta's just built on is built on the climbs now, and it's built on the steep climbs. They hunt out the steepest climbs they can find. The cattle grids on the road, like some of the climbs we've done in the past in the Vuelta with the roads like grated.
So you don't slip.
So the cows can walk up them and all these sorts of things like that. Like it's like the road is built so that the farmer can move his cows from the bottom to the top when the weather gets good. And then we're sending bike riders up there, and obviously Angleroo is a big one. Same thing, another long steep thing. So it's kind of how the Vuelta's progressed with it. As it's changed to a harder Grand Tour, and probably from a stage profile perspective, it is probably the hardest of the 3 Grand Tours.
Oh, definitely. By far. It's head and shoulders.
Yeah, at least for us.
Well, I'm going to tell my first experience of this tour. I was hanging tooth and nail to get through my first Grand Tour. And the biggest problem for me was I'd set the goal to finish my first Grandy pretty much from day one, maybe even before day one. I was like, just got to finish this race. That's all I care about. So by the time I got to the final stage, it was building up like an absolute mountain. I was barely getting through. We start off, Simon Clark's trying to get in the breakaway because he was trying to get the KOM jersey. I'm thinking, just please go, please, breakaway go. The break goes. We're like, yes, it's gone. Clarky's in it. We're going to make it. I remember Trav Meyer was hanging on too. Said, Travie, mate, that's it. Gruppetto's going to form. Fine. We hit this first climb, and Moncute, he starts winding it up, going, I want to get in the break, actually. And so the race explodes on this first climb again. And I'm thinking, oh, no, this is not what I want. We get over this first climb. There's riders absolutely everywhere. I was lucky enough. I found Dom Roland. Him and I jumped on the back of this FDJ car in this valley for 20K, 100K an hour. We get back to this small group, which was Gruppetto, and I'm thinking, oh, I made it. I'm safe. Yes, I can just ride in with this group. I look around, Trav Meyer's not there. I'm thinking, there's just no way he's going to make it. Like, I've been on this FDJ car just ripping it. He's out. I'm like, no, stage 20, he's out. And we still had this climb and then the Bola del Mondo to go. So we head over this penultimate climb, and at the top of this climb, I could hear this car coming behind. I'm like, what's this car? I look back. There's old Vittorio. Travie right behind the car, gets him back. So we get onto this final climb. Trav Meyer's back in the Gruppetto, and then we hit the Bola del Mondo. I'm thinking, yeah, I'm going to make it. No worries. We get up the top, and I'm going to put in the show notes. You got to check it out. From this specific year, I went back and watched it. We turn onto this concrete road, and it is ridiculous. And I love this because when you go back and watch it, Port's in the front with Menchov. Yeah, Menchov wins the stage, but it's back before everyone was riding like 32-tooth chain rings. Clusters. So you can actually see the steepness of the climb. And when we eventually hit this some 35 minutes later, we groveled to the top, and I remember literally crying, going, I don't think I'm going to make it. I've got 1K to go, and I literally cannot make it. All the emotion at that moment, you're like, it's just too much. And this climb was just like the tip of the iceberg.
And you've still got the 23% 500 meters to the finish line as well to go.
It was just absolutely brutal. It's stuck in my mind. There's been much harder climbs in the Vuelta, but in my mind, there was no other climb harder than the Bola del Mondo, purely because of everything that had built up to that moment. Bills, that's my first. What have you got?
I've been looking back a little bit at the race history, and I remembered vaguely, but I looked into it a little bit more in 2012 when Contador won the Vuelta, and it's a real example of how they exposed what was said or what was seen in the media. So Contador was 35 seconds behind Rodriguez and Porito, who in the end never ended up winning the Vuelta España at all, and he was like Spanish, he was the Spanish son. He was leading it going into the final week, and on the second rest day, they had all their press conferences, of course, with the race leader Rodriguez, and of course with Alberto Contador.
Valverde finished in the podium too that year.
He did,
full Spanish affair.
Full Spanish squad. It was 2012. So on the second rest day, they interviewed Contador, and he said, look, the race is over. It's, Rodriguez has been taking time out to be on every single stage, which is a bizarre thought because at this point in time, he was 28 seconds behind, which seems like nothing.
But he couldn't time trial Rodriguez, could he?
Nah, and he couldn't time trial well, but they had just a couple of mountain stages to go, and Contador had kind of conceded to the fact that, look, I can't beat Rodriguez when it goes uphill. So I don't know how I'm going to win the Vuelta. At the same time, in the press conference over the other hotel, wherever Rodriguez was staying, he was saying, "Oh yeah, I've had a great rest day. I just slept all day. I got up late, had a late breakfast, and I went back to bed for a few hours. Got up and had lunch, and then went back to bed and had another sleep." And he said he didn't touch his bike. He just had a complete day off and just lay in bed. So Contador, and interestingly, his lead sports director at this Vuelta was the Australian Brad McGee. They said, "Hey, hang on, look, mate, it's not easy to have a rest day on the second rest day of the Vuelta and think you're going to be good the next day."
Yeah.
So McGee went out late in the afternoon and went and had a look at this and recon the stage. Spent the afternoon and evening reconning the stage, and it wasn't a hard stage, but there was an opportunity to try to expose Rodriguez, and that was when Contador went on the long range attack, 50k into the stage.
Oh yeah, I remember this,
and just blew the Vuelta apart. Rodriguez cracked under the pressure. Valverde passed him on GC, and by the end of that stage, Contador was 1 minute plus in front on the GC in front of Valverde.
Alberto Contador in the white jersey of the leader of the combination, but this man today has totally ignited the Vuelta España. He's found a new chapter in the tactic book that Rodriguez didn't have. He's put the man in the red jersey firmly on the ropes, and he has left everyone trailing across the climbs. This man has ridden an incredible time trial across the mountains. Alberto Contador wins stage 17 of the Vuelta España.
That was an example of when the race started to shift a little bit. Firstly, it showed how important the Vuelta España is to the Spanish people, to Spanish riders. You know, talking about Alberto Contador, who won a couple of Tour de France's and the Giro, and maybe arguably the best Grand Tour rider of his generation, with the exception of getting a couple stripped off him. But he, you know, that was when the progression of racing a little bit started there at the Vuelta. When Contador had the balls to go on this, he was 28 seconds behind. You know, like he sitting second on GC with 5 days to go, and he put it all on the line to try to take 28 seconds back over this 100k period of being alone. And he had it all jacked up. So he had 3 teammates. He was riding for Saxo Bank. He had 3 teammates in the breakaway, all strategically waiting for him at different points. And he had his mate Trialongo. I don't know if you remember Paolo Trialongo.
I do. Yeah.
He was still riding for Astana, but he'd been on Astana with Contador the years before. He was part of the plan. So they actually had 4 guys in the breakaway. But then Trialongo waited at the bottom of the descent, pulled him in the valley till he got to his next teammate, and they just went on this rampage. And I thought that was pretty cool how, you know, you didn't see that a lot in cycling. It was really quite traditional, and you know, the approach to trying to get 28 seconds back would have been like, okay, let's try and get 5 seconds plus a time bonus tomorrow, and then let's try and get another 5 seconds the next day. And, you know, we've got 5 days to bring that deficit back. But instead he was like, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to go all in on this long range attack. And if it doesn't work, I'm probably going to finish 5th. So that was a story that sort of stuck with me a little bit when I looked more into it. And I thought it was quite interesting how McGee went and reconned the stage late at night, and they came up with this strategy quite last minute, all based on how that Rodriguez said he was just sleeping on the rest day.
And the thing I love about that story is I love both sides of that, because that's what Rodriguez was. He was Perito. He was the guy who mucked around. He was, you know, a bit of a playboy, I guess you want to call it, in the Peloton. He was actually a super cool guy to race against. I remember in that Vuelta, he was in the jersey sitting last wheel. And like, I would, you know, naturally being in my first Vuelta, cut him up or do something stupid. He'd be like, yeah, no worries, you know. And like anyone else with the jersey would just go sick at you, you know, get so pissed off. But on the other side, what I like about that is Alberto Contador, he was that ultimate racer that changed that sort of vibe that I guess US Postal sort of started and Sky definitely enhanced. And then, you know, like you said, let's just chip away at it. You know, let's just stick to our numbers. Contador was just all about racing, and that stage, and he did it later in the Vuelta too. And I don't know whether you're going to speak about this later, but there was that epic stage where, you know, pretty much half the Peloton should have been cut out in maybe 2017.
Yeah. I was there. Were you there?
No, I wasn't. I watched it on TV. I was just like, this is beautiful. And you were there. You were in the front group.
I actually wasn't going to use it. That wasn't one of my things, but now we're quickly talking about it. I will just say a few remarks about that stage. So same
so
thing.
It's the same thing, wasn't it? Because that was a brutal stage, but it wasn't as bad for the whole Peloton.
It was short. It was a really short stage. It was like 120K or something. And we started uphill, but the uphill was like, actually, this would pivot later on into another one of my influential points of the
just
Vuelta.
take it now. Go back to back.
So we started up this climb, and it was super short. It was like 2K or 3K. So the whole peloton passed it, and I managed to pass it over this little climb, like in a pretty good spot. And then we came down off this climb,
twisting it.
Yeah, twisting it, absolute nut. And I came down the descent into this valley, and this is my next point that's really influential is crosswinds at the Vuelta. And you
damn it, I've got a good one too.
And so we came down, but there was some crosswinds, but there was also, conveniently a motorbike in front of the first rider on the peloton, who happened just to be Alberto Contador. So he decided, let's jam it in the crosswinds here. And it split like in a matter of seconds into like a pretty big group, a big group, like 40 guys, let's say. So I was in the front group, and then they went away again, Contador, from that group. I think he went away alone, actually, or with a really small group.
Yeah, but you hit another climb, didn't you? A big long climb.
Yeah, we had it was like a huge long, like a 40K climb, basically. They just kept on going up and up this valley and just got steeper and steeper and then finished at the top of it. And I was chasing from behind for some reason. I don't know why, but I was the only guy there. I think it must have been for Chavez. And so I was chasing from behind. And then eventually I got dropped from the lead group of like 40 guys. And the peloton, or the gruppetto at that point, was 100 guys. But they all decided like, oh, the race is over.
They're not going to cut us.
We don't really care. They're not going to cut us. So they were so far behind that when I got dropped, I was like, okay, I'm good now. I'll just ride easy for a few K, and then eventually this group of 100 guys will catch me, and I'll just have a ride into the finish line. And I was riding along for like 20 minutes. I was like, where is this group? So I stopped for a piss. I was having a piss on the side of the road, looking back, couldn't see any cars, any people.
It was like you were just doing a road ride on your own.
And I had like 70K to go or 60K to go, and I was just riding along by myself, like, surely this group's going to catch me. And they didn't. So I ended up riding the whole stage by myself, basically.
Bullshit.
I finished,
you rode the whole stage.
Yeah. And I finished like, I was time cut. So everyone from me onwards was time cut. But I was still like 8 minutes or 6 minutes or something in front of this group of 100. But then I see then the next day, the cycling podcast had this award, like the Pedaleur de Charme or something it was called, I think. And they used to hand out a T-shirt to the most heroic dude, or the biggest ride the day before and stuff. So they came over the next day and presented me with this T-shirt for my heroic ride of trying to stay in the time cut. I was stopping at pissing and trying to wait for this group, and they just never came. And it was like stuff on Twitter like, oh, it's a joke that the 100 guys think that they're just going to get let back in, which of course they did. But they just take the piss out of the race and they sit and they ride easy. Sam Bewley was the only one who really tried to make it by himself. I didn't try to make it at all. I just happened to make the front group, and because I had good position. Then I got dropped, and I couldn't ride any slower trying to wait for this group to catch me. But in the end, we were all time cut, and then they let us all back in again. But I finished there somewhere in the middle by myself.
I didn't know that bit. I remember you were in the front bit, and I just assumed, because when the camera showed you at one point eventually getting dropped, I was like, yeah, sweet, Bill's just going to go back to the bunch. But at that point, I didn't realize the gap was so far. Because I think all the Sky guys missed it. Not one Sky guy was in the front. They all just sat up.
Yeah. It was. They just stopped straight away. They didn't even try. And it was like, it was time cut. Because, I mean, the time cut was probably 20 minutes that day because the stage was only 3 hours or less than 3 hours. But still, that was another example of Contador going on a rampage when you least expect it. A racer, like you said.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to go to my next one then. That were two very good ones, Bules. And I think this is one that maybe can cross across for both of us. And it's something that's close to heart, is the Andorra stages. Recently in the last few years, it's not that the racing didn't go to Andorra ever before. The tour was up there as well in the 90s, and there was a couple of Vueltas that passed through there. But consistently through our period of racing it, Andorra was a major feature. Like for me, 212 was there, 213, 215, they had a stage. 2018, they had two stages. 2019, there was another stage. And look, specifically the stages I want to talk about are the stages that start and finish in Andorra. And these are the short stages that they started experimenting with. where they went, and if anyone's ever been to Andorra, there is actually no flat roads there. There's like a couple of roads that maybe there's a tunnel that's flat, but any other road, there's another sort of valley road that's like 1 or 2%, but there is literally no flat road there, is there?
No. It's just a mountainous. Yeah, I mean, it's it's a country, obviously, or principality. It's got a population of about 70,000 people, and they're all jammed into where they could find space to build a house between one mountain and the next.
And so that's exactly what the Vuelta did. I want to focus for me specifically on 2 stages that were pretty similar. Stage 11 of the 2015 tour. It started in La Vella and went up Cortals to End Camp. And I specifically remember this one because we started in La Vella, we went straight up through the tunnel and we hit Bacheles straight away, straight up the steep side of this new road that they sort of tarred in the last few years. It was actually not tarred all the way over, and they thought, oh, the Vuelta, maybe we'll actually make this tar.
And this was Rodriguez Perito's doing, wasn't it? Speaking of him earlier on in the show, he's the one who brought the stages to Andorra because that's where he lives, and he's got this affection with the climbs that no one else has the affection with.
And I remember going up there, going already in the neutral, like, oh, this is already hard. And we hit the left there and Froome punched, and I was already getting dropped straight away. And then the Sky team came back with Froome, and I was just out the back. I'm like, oh, I'll stick with the Sky guys. I'll get back with these guys.
I'll follow Froome back to the front up this climb. It's 10%, 12%.
So I got dropped again. Anyway, I was off the back. And the one time, actually, no, 2 times in my career, one time I held a car early in my career was in a French race. This is outside of the Vuelta. Early with Skill Shimano, I was trying to get back in a race like Dunkirk or something, and a car came past me, and I thought, I'm just going to grab onto this car and I'll get back to the bunch here, you know? Because maybe everyone's thinking, yeah, why don't pros just grab onto cars more? This car thought he was past me, so he's like, cool, I'm past that rider that I was near, so I'm just going to literally floor it now. So I'm hanging onto the roof.
You're holding onto the tow bar.
I'm hanging onto the side of the roof rack as this guy goes, sweet, I'm past that rider now. I'm just going to just launch it into like 100k an hour. So I'm dragging on the roof rack going, you better stop. So this is my first experience of hanging onto a car. So from that moment on, I was like, right, don't hang onto a car anymore. This day specifically, fast forward, 10 years down the track, 2015, I'm out the back with one other guy, Dennis Van Vindem. We're up this second climb, and I'm like, I need to get back to Gruppetto. We're going past our team car, Green Edge car, and I'm just like, that's it. I've got to just sling off this car. I need everything I can do. We're going up Col de Ordino, the backside, from Ordino. And just as I'm hanging onto the car, I forgot, because I'm on the passenger side. As I'm hanging onto the car, just getting a bit of a sling, I look in the passenger side. There's the team owner, Jerry Ryan, sitting right there. And he's just looking at me with a face of disgust. He's just like,
hey, g'day, Mitch.
G'day, Mitch. Having a tough day, are you, mate? 8K into the race. Instantly let go. And that was my second reminder of, yep, you don't need to hang on to cars. So, look, this stage, I got through this stage, brutally got through it, but this was the undoing of me in this Vuelta. 2 days later, I was out of the Vuelta, and I still put it down to this stage. I went so deep in this stage just to make the time cut because it's just mountain after mountain, and they're so short. It's 140K. I didn't write down the exact altitude meters that we cover, but you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 category 1 climbs and a horse cat climb.
I think that stage was like, I didn't race it that year, but I remember the hype about it being before the Vuelta, like we're going to Andorra and we're going to do this brutal stage, and I'm pretty sure off the top of my head it was something like 5,000 meters of climbing.
Yeah,
close to 5,000 meters and 140K. Like,
it's
nuts.
Literally just up and down. It's just like a climber's paradise or a fat bastard's hell.
Yeah.
You're just like, I was so scared. I remember for this stage, I freaked myself out of it so bad. And look, later on, we had another stage in 2019, I think, and it did. No, 2018, we did the same sort of thing, or 2019, sorry. Same sort of thing, La Vella to Cortals, and the same thing, you're just looping around Andorra. But I got around it a hell of a lot better. I think it was just the mentality. But yeah, what's your experience of racing those stages, Bills?
Well, I did a few. I did one stage, which was the 2019 stage you're talking about, that was in in Andorra. Like you say, started in La Vella. We went straight up the main road towards France. We went over Col de Ordino, down. Then we went back into the city. Went over Galena, which is arguably probably the hardest climb in Andorra, or certainly one of them. And then we went up to Cortals. But the interesting thing about that stage was that there's two climbs for those who haven't been to Andorra, which I'm sure is plenty. There's two climbs that are linked by a gravel walking track, I would say. No, like it's one car width maybe, and it's open all year. But on the weekends, it's full with people running and people pushing prams and little kids learning how to ride bikes. And it's actually the only flat road in Andorra, but it's a walking track and it's gravel.
It's like a rail trail, really.
Yeah, like a rail trail. Yeah, exactly. And that links two climbs. It links this climb Cortals de Encamp, which Mitch has been talking about, and this other climb Engalastas. So we went up Engalastas and across the gravel to finish on top of Cortals de Encamp. But I remember that massive hailstorm came in. It was like the middle of summer, but this afternoon mountain storm rolled in, and it pissed down. And it was like there was massive hailstones. I remember Skabu Gamai, who we were riding with on Greenwich at the time. He stopped and was hiding in someone's garage because the hailstones were so. And I was just trudging on in the gruppetto back in the gruppetto with whoever was there. And
I was there.
You were there, yeah. And the stage just started really hard because Chavez was on GC and he dropped his chain or broke his chain or something on the Galena, bottom of Galena. So he jumped onto Damien Housen's bike.
Damo's bike. That's right. That massive, the worst person his bike he could get.
So when you think about someone who's 5 foot and you think about someone who's 6'3", doesn't really match. It's not really the bike you want. So he's trying to get his way up Galena. And I remember just getting back to Chavez and trying to give him a bit of a hand, which I couldn't do because I wasn't fast enough, and he was also on a bike that was 3 times too big for him. So it was all sort of happening on that stage. But then that hailstorm came and it just pissed down, and we had to go across that gravel rail trail, which is generally quite nice. You can ride your road bike over it, no problem. But it just pissed down so hard that it was just turned into mud, and people were crashing, and the temperature went from about 30 degrees to about 12 degrees in this blink of an eye, and it just ended up being more epic than it already was. That stage, or any stage in Andorra, is always going to be epic, just because of the climbs. But when that weather rolled in, it was an interesting experience, that one. And then we had to get the cable car down. It took about 45 minutes to get down. Then we had the long transfer, the 3.5-hour transfer to Po in the bus, and Visma actually had a helicopter all lined up. They thought they were smarter than everybody else, and they were going to get a helicopter across to Po.
But they couldn't go,
because of the weather. The helicopter couldn't go, so the bus had already left, so then the bus had to come back and get them. It was just Andorra in a nutshell.
It was. I remember my mother-in-law brought our son up, Marlo, and it was a nice day. So they took the cable car up, and at the end of those stages, there's an epic line for people to get down the cable car, and we were just going to cruise down because it's actually not that long the climb, maybe like 6K or 7K from that point. So you could cruise down, and when I got up there, she was up there just in shorts and T-shirt. My son was only 1.5 or 2. He was up there in shorts and T-shirt just crying because they just got smashed with this hailstorm. And they're like, can you get us down? And this line to get in the cable car was like 300 meters long of fans, and they're just in there. And I was just like, all right, come with me. And we just snuck in, got them up right in the front. I was like, what a disaster this is. So
the Andorra stages, some tough stages. And there'll be plenty more in the Vuelta, I hazard a guess.
Oh, and hopefully way more. Maybe a week up there.
Yeah, that'd be good. This should be the whole first week of the Vuelta in Andorra.
I reckon later. Get in the last week, so the weather's maybe a little iffy.
Finish with the time trial, like 80K time trial, up six different climbs or something.
Bottom to top, 25K TT.
There you go. Yeah. And they did a stage one year in Andorra where they went up. There's like the big main road that goes from the bottom city all the way up and over into France. And like Mitch just said, it's like a 25K climb or plus maybe. But there's only one road, so you can't go. But there's a tunnel, and there's a tunnel that skips the last 4K of the climb. So they did a stage in the Vuelta where they went through the tunnel and then back up the other side and then came back down into Andorra and continued the stage. So yeah, that would have been tough. Glad I wasn't in that one.
I was in that one. It was hell. Yeah. What do you got for me?
I've just, since we've been talking about Contador earlier in the show, and now we've been touched a little bit on Chavez, Esteban Chavez, that is, little Colombian dude who finished second in the Giro in in 2016, and then we went to the Vuelta I was at the Giro with him, and then we went to the Vuelta together as well to try to win the Vuelta with him there. And there was it was a big lineup. There was Froome was there. Froome ended up winning the Vuelta. Contador was there. Esteban was there. Who'd been finished second in the Giro. So it was a pretty strong field there. And we were talking earlier about how Contador used to put his balls on the line and go on these long range attacks, and that was kind of his style. And stage 20 of the Vuelta 2016, we flipped the script on Contador, and so Esteban was fourth on GC, and he was 45 seconds behind Contador, who was in third. And it was this one stage to go, and it was a mountain stage, but it wasn't like an overly difficult stage. It was lumpy throughout the day, and then it finished. There's 2 hard climbs in the final, but to find 45 seconds on Contador on the final climb was essentially impossible. So we came up with this plan that we were going to try and split it early in the race when no one expected it. There was, we were talking about those crosswinds at the Vuelta, and then there was a breath of a crosswind, I would say, not much more. But we thought, it's a Vuelta, it'd be enough. So we tried to put it in the gutter early on in the stage, and we had the whole peloton sitting behind us as one big group, and Greenedge just going full gas for like 20K trying to split it. I think we got rid of one. I think we got rid of one.
Well done, boys.
We got rid of one guy who maybe had a stomach bug or something, and and then we stopped because it wasn't working. And literally the peloton took the piss out of us. They were like, "What are you idiots doing?" Just like completely took the piss out of us. So we're like, "Fuck, what are we going to do now? We need to find 45 seconds for Chavez." So actually met myself and Jens Kukelier, who we had a conversation, and we went back to the team car and we spoke to Neil Stevens, who's the sports director, and I said, "Look, we just got to try again. We have to try again. Otherwise, we're going to finish fourth in the Vuelta." And Chavez was the kind of guy who was like, "For me, fourth's the same as 10th. So I'm all in to try to finish on the podium." And we had this long, draggy climb up to the base of the second to last climb, which was 50K to go. So we got to that climb and we just put the whole team on the front, and we just went as hard as we could for like 5K. Blew the whole team to bits. And it was enough of a crosswind there that it kind of put the whole bunch under pressure, and it did start splitting up. But of course, like Contador and stuff aren't struggling. When you got like me putting on the front on the climb, Contador's not going to have too much trouble. But it was hard enough. And then Chavez just went. He just went, attacked. And
who was the last pull?
I think Giro maybe.
Yeah, right. And then he just launched off him.
He just launched off him like 45, 50K to go. And it was like 5K to go on this climb. Then it was a super long descent, like 25K descend down into a valley, like a little bit in the valley. And then you kind of came back up the same climb, but from the other side, a big long climb. And we had Damien Housen in the breakaway. So we got him it's actually quite a, if you haven't seen the backstage pass, I recommend going to watch the backstage pass from Orica Greenedge.
I'll put in the show notes. Stage
20 and of Neil Stevens radioing up to the second car, which was following Damo in the breakaway, saying, "Damo's got to stop, Chavez is coming." And then they're watching it on the TV, and Damo's still riding along, and he's like, "I told him he's got to fucking stop. And then Damo...
Who's saying that's Sivo?
Sivo, yeah. So then Damo stops at the top of the climb, grabs Chavez, and then Damo just does this impressive like 25K down this descent, just railing it. And it's like 30 seconds, 25 seconds, 30 seconds to the group with Contador in it. And then at that point, they're still thinking, "Oh, we're all good." Contador's like, "We've still got a 15K climb to the finish line." Damo manages to get Chavez to the bottom of the last climb, and then Chavez just goes for it. 20K times, 15K times up this final climb. We had Simon Yates, who was sitting fifth on GC as well. And he was in the GC group, and he was just messing it all up, like doing this. Contador had one teammate left, so he was pulling, trying to bring him back. So then Yatesy would just attack to make the Contador's teammate have to close him just to blow him up. And eventually he blew him up earlier than probably what he would have. And then Contador was alone. So then Contador had to go. And then Froome was there. Froome was attacking Contador. So then Contador was like under a bit of pressure, having to mark Froome, but at the same time, like he needed to pull because Chavez was up the road. And then it just got into the situation where it was just Chavez versus Contador up this final climb. And Chavez took 50 seconds out of Contador and moved into the podium by 5 seconds and finished third in the Vuelta that year. So that was a pretty cool stage to be part of. It was flipping the script on how Contador used to like racing, and then we'd finish second at the Giro with Chavez, and then we did that tactic to finish third at the Vuelta. So that was a pretty cool story. That was a cool stage. Good memory.
That is an awesome story. That's brilliant. Like, I think I want to just try and follow that one up. Seeing as we're talking about it, I've got to speak about the 2015 Vuelta, sort of where it all started with Chavez, and him coming back from his massive injury, and essentially Green Edge and Steve-O really taking a chance on him and giving him a contract. Him coming back, and he really wanted to prove himself to the team, and to say almost like thanks, like for I want to show you how much I am worthy of that contract. And
because he had a career-ending injury when he came to our team, when he busted his shoulder so badly.
Yeah, he had to get his whole shoulder rebuilt, and the nerve. He had to get a nerve transplant, didn't he? Exactly.
Yeah.
Like he couldn't even grab a bottle on that side when he started with us.
Exactly. So yeah, he wanted to. He was trying to pay back, and that like you say, 2015 Vuelta was when he sort of burst onto the scene, didn't he?
He burst on the scene, and he went on this epic attack. It was stage 2, actually, straight up. We got third in the team's time trial. We started down south. This team's time trial was a real doozy as well. We're on the coast. We're riding on bike paths and all this sort of stuff. And then we get to stage 2. And I remember you got to watch the backstage too. There's another good one. Heyman gives him the heads up. He's like, "Nah, you can actually win today." And he didn't necessarily have that belief yet. It sounds obvious now. We all know Chavez that he's a winner now, but back then to win a stage of the Vuelta it just seemed out of this world. And the way he won it too, he attacked. Dumoulin attacked. He get across to Dumoulin, and then he dropped Dumoulin, and he held the jersey for 4 days in that tour. The best thing about this tour is there's a whole lot of stuff going on. It was Caleb Ewan's first Grand Tour as well. And he comes in and Steve-O is a classic character of the Vuelta. He should have been actually in this. We should have just done Steve-O as one of these.
Should have.
We can. Let's roll it now.
Yeah.
Steve-O just didn't rate Caleb being there. Just straight up, I'm going to say it, just did not want Caleb in the race. And somehow he got forced in the race. He's like, nah, we're here for Chavez. We're riding GC. He had his plan, and all of a sudden he had to deal with Caleb. He's like, So he had him getting bottles for the first 3-4 days. He's like, yeah, mate, you're just like Domestique. You're never going to make it over the hills and all this sort of stuff. And it was, I think maybe Caleb's first or second year. I can't remember exactly. Second year maybe. And anyway, finally we get to stage 5 after Chavez has had 2 stage win. We've been in the jersey. It's a sprint stage. Steve-O's like, all right, Caleb, sprint stage for you, mate. Not even being protected, no faith. Finally, we come to this sprint stage. We've got 3 of us looking after him, myself, Heyman, and Kukalair. And 3K to go, I find myself as all these roundabouts, an uphill finish, just Heyman and I, and Caleb in my wheel. Kooks has gone missing. And I'm like, we're way too early. We're on the front. So I'm like, how far can I get out of Heyman here? So I'm trying to just squeeze a little bit more out of him. Next roundabout, mate, come on. Get me the next one. I'm like, great, that's another 500 done. Great, maybe I can get another wheel. Or maybe next roundabout, Heyman. Heyman gets me to 500 to go. He does this almighty turn. I do a pretty piss weak turn, get Caleb into the final corner. Caleb just launches it up the final climb, beats Degenkolb, gets a stage win.
Caleb Ewan is staying there. He's going with Degenkolb. You can see that Sagan is there as well, and so is Jempi Drucker. And I think Drucker's got the strength today. Has he in the red? Now he starts to ebb, and the nodding head of Degenkolb comes to the front. But Caleb Ewan's going to get this one. The little guy is a big guy today. How's about that?
Just absolutely ecstatic. We're having this amazing tour. Randomly, Chavez loses the jersey that day. There's a split in the bunch. He loses the jersey. A bit of a sour point. So he just comes back the next day, takes stage 6. Doesn't just win 2. Takes the jersey back, wins the stage 6.
They are beating the hoardings here. It's a cacophony of sounds, but the biggest call of all is the name of Chavez. It's ringing back down the mountains, and with just desserts, this man is going to take the day. He's going to take it here amongst the crowds. He's enormously popular. Many of you will be delighted to see him back in red, and so it is that it comes to pass.
And just kicks on. So it's this amazing tour where I sort of found in those years there, 12, 13, 14, 15, it was just this great bond. When we got to the end of the year, so what should we say about Steve-O? It was his baby. And he loved creating this great team at Green Edge about the Vuelta. And he installed this, this faith. We were riding together in some of those teams. Like, he always had these grand plans and we're going to do it. And he'd use every morsel of energy from every rider, whatever ability they were. He'd always find a plan for them. And like the 215 Vuelta has so many great memories for me for that stage win. But it was also that's one Grand Tour that I wasn't able to finish, because of that Vuelta stage, which we spoke about before. So there's like this mixed bag, but it always sits in the back of my mind, 2015.
Because you guys, you won 3 stages there. Chavez burst on the scene, and Steve-O, like he was great. He was actually great when it came to the Vuelta. He loved it. He's obviously Australian, but he's adopted Spaniard. Oh, well, he lives in the Basque Country, but he's an adopted Spaniard. He speaks fluent Spanish. He's been there for years. His wife's from here, and he'd recon every stage of the Vuelta before it started. 21 stages all across the country. So it was pretty impressive the way, the effort he put into it, and obviously Chavez, like you said earlier in the talking about him, Chavez was kind of his boy. He brought him to the team, and he looked after him, and they still have a really close relationship now, I think.
All right, well, I've got to do an honourable mention. We've already spoken about him really briefly, but Alessandro Valverde, Bala, the Green Bullet.
Legend.
Absolute legend. 20-year career. Do you know how many Vueltas he did?
21.
16. Yeah. 21, good answer. 16 Vueltas. He only won the Vuelta once, 2009, but he was outside the top 10 of those 16 times. He was only outside the top 10 2 times.
Wow.
And he wasn't way outside. He was 12th and 13th. 3 times second, 3 times third, 12 stage wins as well.
12. Yeah, I was going to ask how many stage wins.
It's just like I know, I don't know this for sure, but I'm sure the other tours meant a lot. He only rode the Giro twice, and he didn't ride the tour that many times. I should have known how many times. But the Vuelta really was his baby. And as you spoke about that before, there's something about the Spanish riders that had to do well at the Vuelta, wasn't it?
Yeah. It makes sense, doesn't it? I guess if there was it's just like every Australian wants to race Tour Down Under, and
Southland in New Zealand.
The Tour of Southland in New Zealand, 4th Grand Tour. Yeah, no, he was like, because he'd been around so long, and he was so successful across the board. World champion. He won Flèche Wallonne a handful of times, and Liège-Bastogne-Liège, and Amstel Gold Race, and he was so successful that it was just so important for him to come back to.
I'd completely forgotten about the 4th Grandy.
Yeah. You have to do another episode on the 4th Grandy.
Southland.
Yeah. But no, it was so important for him to go back and race in Spain. That's why he did 16. He's a guy who could have gone to the Tour de France and 16 times and won 12 stages or more stages there, and worn the yellow jersey a number of times, and maybe had a tilt at winning the Tour de France. But for him, it was important to go back to Spain, and he always lived in Spain. Like nowadays, a lot of Spanish riders, they will move to Andorra. He stayed in Spain, where he was born, where he's always lived, and he's loved and adored by all the people there. And it's impressive. And there's 2 things that is impressive: that he only finished out of the top 10 twice, but he only won it once, which is crazy. Across the caliber of that guy, and across 16 editions, he only won it one time. You could easily be having a conversation where he'd won it multiple times. Yeah. But that was
3 times second.
But he was also a cowboy. He raced every stage like it was the only one. And maybe that was to his downfall at times. But I guess it's how you rack up 12 stage wins as well.
Cleansing ale in the bus every single stage.
I tried that actually when I heard that. I was at the Vuelta in 2016, and I heard the story about how the first thing he'd do when he'd walk on the bus is have a beer after every stage. So I thought I'd try it.
Who shut it down?
Just in training. Well, no, I asked Steve-O if we could. He goes, "Look, mate, I don't have a problem with you having a beer. As long as you do your recovery first, you have a shower and you have your protein shake, and then if you want to have a beer, I don't have a problem with it." And then I was like, kind of doesn't really work the same if I can't just nick a beer as soon as I walk on the bus with my helmet on. I want that vibe, But I tried it in training, and tough and well done, chapeau. Maybe that's why I didn't win more than one.
All right. Speaking of beers on the race, I think this is maybe a joint one, but I could be speaking out of turn. But for me, I'm going to throw it out there. It's my favorite memory of my Vuelta experience, potentially my most favorite memory of all my Grand Tours. That's a big one, but it's up there. And I've linked it under, because the tour finishes at the end of the year, this is what makes it feel so good. you're really at the end of the year. And like you said, those October vibes are coming. You're speaking about it in the last week of the Vuelta. What are you doing next week? Oh, how many more races you got to go? This season's done. You literally just need to roll over the line and you're done. And we did it in the most beautiful way in 2014. Yes, 2014. The time trial, it finished with a time trial in Santiago de Compostela in Galicia. And like they normally finish in Madrid and they threw this time trial in. And I thought, this is going to be a bit of an anticlimax, which is a bit like the Tour this year. You and I had pretty much a good close time trial together. We're maybe like a few minutes apart, because we're back on GC and we'd made the plan. Hey, what are we going to do after? We still got like a couple of hours to wait for all the riders. Actually, we got back, we had a shower, we walked from the hotel onto the course and we thought, we'll watch some of the riders. There was a little bar kicking off. So we sat down and we just immersed ourselves into the crowd and we just absorbed the atmosphere of the final stage of the race. And I hadn't even felt like I'd ridden a whole Vuelta. We sat down, we had about, I wouldn't even know how many beers we had. We had
heaps.
Heaps. And the whole race just got washed away and we watched the whole race in front of us because we were off that early. It was like this dual complex of being in the race, so you knew what it felt like, plus I got to absorb the race like I was a fan. It was just the best moment ever.
Yeah, for me, it's one of my most special memories. Firstly, I was sitting there with my mate having a beer after the Vuelta, but it was also the first Grand Tour I finished. So the 2013 Vuelta was my first Grand Tour, and I stopped on the second rest day to go home to Girona to prepare for the World's Team Time Trial, which was only a few days after the Vuelta, so I stopped early. And then 2014 Vuelta was my second Grand Tour and the first one that I finished. So that's why it was pretty cool for me. And I remember walking up to that pub, and it was like the quintessential like Spanish bar. It was awesome. It was on a corner. Like there was a big crowd there, but everybody was on the road, forward on the road. So there was a few free tables there, and we just plonked ourselves down. We had vision of the race, and we didn't have team clothes on. I remember we were just in normal clothes. And it was kind of cool to be like, we're sitting here as part of the crowd, drinking a few beers, eating a few olives, watching the Vuelta España that we just raced. We went 45 minutes earlier, we went around that corner on our bikes. And all the people around us drinking beers and doing the same thing had no idea. We were just two guys watching the race. But it was so cool that we were like, we were actually in the Vuelta. We've just finished the Vuelta. And the best part about it for me was that actually I had a really good ride in that time trial. And luckily, because I was off early, as they poured the first beer, the rain started to fall. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, like, this is not going to be easy, this course in the wet. And we sat there under the cover drinking beers, watching the rain fall, and all the much better riders come past, much better riders than I was at time trialing. And I finished 9th on the stage, I think, in the end. So
did you?
Yeah,
I didn't remember that.
9th or 10th or something. Yeah.
But you got called back up? I think we were joking about it at the time.
Because I was sitting right up there for a long, long, long time. I was like, I'm actually still like there's only like 30 guys to go, and I'm like sitting third or something, second or something. It's like, fuck, I better stop drinking. I might have to go to the podium. But no, that was pretty cool. And then we obviously went back to the team hotel after, and we went out for a nice team dinner there in Santiago, and then went to some sifty nightclub, and then flew home the next day with a massive hangover, left my iPad on the plane, and it was just the start of a great night. That was a cool memory, though.
It was a very cool memory. Well, should we just do a last couple here? We've been banging on for ages. The last sort of questionable ones. Have you got one to kick us off, Bills? The one that sort of spring to mind, or you want me to kick it off?
Well, I was thinking about it. I think one thing that comes to my mind, one controversial moment in the Vuelta was in 2015, again, when pre-race favourite Vincenzo Nibali was kicked out of the race on the second stage for holding onto a car, just like you admitted to doing earlier in the show up at Charlie's in Andorra. And he was the pre-race favourite. He was flying at the time. He was coming to the Vuelta to try and win it. He'd won it before, but he wanted to win it again. And it was like such a benign moment as well. It was a sprint stage. It had been a really hard start. And then he had a puncture, and he was caught from the helicopter footage just holding onto the car and just went. There'd been a hard start, so there was quite a few groups. So rather than just sort of the commentators turning a blind eye because he's just getting himself back to the next group, he was just holding on to the car.
He went past the group.
Past groups.
Yeah.
Woof, woof, woof. and then they kicked him out of the race. And so that's probably like a little bit of one controversial moment I think back to, like where he fucked up. He was probably pretty safe that day that it was all going to come back together, and he put himself out of the Vuelta by holding on to a team car.
I remember that moment. I remember the car going past. I'm like, what the hell? And we all complained about it. You're like, oh, nothing will ever happen from that.
Yeah.
But well, it did. My one's a little bit controversial, I guess, or a little bit surprising anyway. And we're both there. You were there definitely for the start. You just said before you got pulled out for the team's time trial. But it was 2013, the winner, Chris Horner, at age 41, oldest ever Grand Tour winner. Well, probably in the modern peloton, that is. Wins the Vuelta in 2013, age 41. He turned pro in 1995, but the Horn Dog, he was just like the most unorthodox pro, wasn't he? Like, if you ever spoke to him, he was just, I've recently just gone back and had a look at it just for this podcast to understand that again. He was never really on the radar. It was only himself who thought he was on the radar because the way he rode, he was in Europe initially as a pro. Then he went back to the States. Everyone sort of forgot about him. He came back across and he was all this guy who ate junk food. He didn't really care about the way he was riding. And the way he says it is he just had the best possible form and he knew he was always going to be up there. He beat Nibali. He beat Valverde. It just leaves this sort of, and there's always been this question around what the hell, because he was part of that, came from that era that was clearly doping. And then he was in this era that was cleaned up, let's say it like that. So there's this question mark around it. But I just remember it was such a weird thing in the race that a guy like Horner was winning it. I remember being in that race going, I think Horner's going to win. How weird's that? Like he was just this old bloke.
I remember when he won on a stage in, I think it was in Sierra Nevada.
It was. And we were riding up together in the Gruppetto.
Yeah. And it finished like up Monticello or something, like super steep climb again. And he won that stage. And I remember thinking, because I was on the team with him the year 2013. So I was on the team with him 2 years before that in Radio Shack. And there was never a part of me that thought, he's going to win the Vuelta. It was like, someone's got to win the stage, I guess. And it's early on, and the GC guys are marking each other out a little bit, and they're not ready to really open up the pipes yet. And then it got more and more into the race, and then Nibali took over the lead. And then I was looking back through the results last night, actually, and I was under the impression that he took the leader's jersey at some point early on in the race, and he held it on and he won the Vuelta. But actually, Nibali was in the leader's jersey, and then he just and Horndog just kept on picking him back, and he ended up winning the Vuelta. And the funny thing was, like you say, it was I don't know whether it was his age, the fact that he was 41 when he won the Vuelta, or whether it was suspicious minds, but he didn't get a contract after that.
It was so weird, wasn't it?
Yeah, or he ended up no one wanted him. No one wanted to sign the winner of the Vuelta España, which was crazy. And he ended up somewhere for riding for Knicks in a shirt, I can't remember which team he ended up on, but it was just really, really bizarre that someone could win the Vuelta España.
Was it a European team, or did he go back to the States?
Might have gone back to the States. Yeah, it was something really weird, but it was just so bizarre that somebody could win a Grand Tour and no one wanted to sign him, And probably it was because he was 41 and they knew that, when Heyman won Roubaix, he was at the age where he wasn't going to now sign a multi-year $1 million deal because, so maybe it was a bit like, he's 41, he's not going to win the Vuelta again, so why sign him and, what's his price tag? It was a really bizarre situation.
Well, should we leave it at that?
Sure. Been good fun. I'm looking forward to the Vuelta now. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I know. That's the whole point.
What's today? Tuesday kicks off on Saturday.
I'm going to be calling it on SBS.
Nice.
Some of it. What are you going to do?
Watch it. Yeah.
On real time.
Yeah. I'm not going to be there. I actually nearly got dragged into going to the Vuelta to be DS there because I left the Tour de France much earlier than I needed to or expected. No, I needed to leave because my wife was in labour. But it was much earlier than I expected it to happen. So I missed a big chunk of the Tour de France. So I was nearly got dragged into the Vuelta, but I managed to dig my heels in a little bit. So I'm not going, but I'll be watching it. Looking forward to it. It's going to be, that first week's going to be brutal, man. It's going to be brutal. Super hot down in the south. Big stage in Granada, up Sierra Nevada.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's going to be big first week.
Beautiful, Bills.
Thanks very much.
Well, there we have it. Has that got you in the mood for the Vuelta España? It's just around the corner. Like I said at the end of the episode, I'll be trying to commentate some things over at SBS for the first week, so tune in and have a listen there. And it was great to have Sam on there to hear what he's up to. He'll be cruising around watching the race as well. A big thanks goes out to our major partner, MAAP. Really loving working with those guys this year. You guys for listening, and of course, Red Bricks Media, who put this episode together. The Life in the Peloton team, who are working away on the Dirty Docker coming up, plus everything else around the edges. And of course, like I said in the intro, Elderton Wines. Get yourself a cheeky glass of Shiraz, kick back, listen to a podcast, and watch the Vuelta. Guys, and until next time, take it easy. Cheers.
That iconic music in this episode was composed by none other than the legend, Pete Shelley. Cheers, mate.